In the world of normal men, a spill is just a mistake that could cost a dry cleaning bill, a quick apology, and a towel. But in the underworld, a spill means more than an accident. Aisha stands in the center of the kill zone, trembling in a maid's uniform that costs less than the cigars these men smoke. The VIP room at Il Palazzo is frozen. 50 men in tailored suits holding pistols, and every single one of them is holding their breath. By all laws of the Mafia, Aisha should already be dead as dark red wine drips from Don Salvator's white silk lapel like a gaping wound. The bodyguards' hands hover over their jackets, waiting for the nod that says erase her. But the nod never comes. Because the Don didn't just see a clumsy maid spill wine. He heard a ghost. Slowly, Aisha stops trembling. Her posture snaps straight. She stops looking at the floor and locks eyes with the devil himself. When she speaks, the voice that comes out doesn't belong to a 20-something girl from Queens. It's deep, rhythmic, terrifying, and it's in the dialect of the old mountains. A language that hasn't been spoken in this room since 1990. The blood on the floor is not mine, Don Salvator, but the blood on your hands is why I'm here. His ebony cane slips from his grip. It hits the marble like a gunshot. 3 hours before the cane hit the floor, Aisha was on her hands and knees, scrambling to pick up a silver fork she just dropped. Il Palazzo wasn't really a restaurant. It was a bank vault that served risotto. The walls were mahogany, the clientele were criminals, and the staff were perpetually terrified. I'm sorry, sir," Aisha stammered, clutching the fork to her chest. She backed away, tripping over her own feet and nearly knocking over a priceless Ming vase. A busboy rolled his eyes. To everyone in the room, she was a disaster, a diversity hire who couldn't walk in heels. But if you looked closely, closer than any of these arrogant men ever would, you'd see something strange. She fell exactly where the security camera had a blind spot. She dropped the fork exactly when the head of security punched in the kitchen keypad code. She wasn't clumsy. She was gathering data. The floor manager, a sweaty tyrant named Marco, grabbed her by the arm. His grip was bruising. "Listen to me, you idiot," he hissed, dragging her into the shadowed service corridor. "Tonight is not a normal Friday. The royal family is coming." He didn't mean the British royals. He meant the Venaris. Don Salvator was coming out of exile for the first time in a decade. "The Don does not tolerate mistakes," Marco whispered, leaning in close enough for Aisha to smell his stale espresso breath. "If you drop so much as a napkin tonight, you won't get fired. You will disappear. Do you understand? They will roll you up in a carpet and dump you in the harbor." "Yes, sir," Aisha squeaked, her eyes wide with tears. "I promise." Marco shoved her toward the restrooms. "Fix your face. You look like a frightened rabbit." Aisha stumbled into the staff bathroom and locked the door. The moment the latch clicked, the transformation was instant. The tears evaporated. The trembling in her hands ceased, replaced by the stillness of a surgeon. She reached into a hidden seam in her apron and felt the cold, hard outline of a ceramic blade. She looked at her reflection, her eyes cold, dead, and ready. "Just one night," she whispered. Aisha stepped out of the bathroom and into a different world. The ambient chatter of the restaurant had died. It wasn't quiet, it was silent. The air conditioning seemed to drop 10 degrees, but the sweat on Marco's forehead was doubling. They were here. First came Luca Venari. He was the new face of the family, handsome, sharp, and smelling of money. He wore his arrogance like a second skin, checking his phone as he walked past a line of bowing staff. He didn't look at people, he looked through them. But the room didn't freeze for Luca. It froze for the shadow limping behind him, Don Salvator. The Don looked like a relic dug up from a grave in Corleone. He was shrunken inside a heavy black coat, leaning his weight on an ebony cane topped with a silver lion. He wore pitch-black sunglasses indoors. As he shuffled past Aisha, a scent washed over her, a nauseating mix of expensive bergamot cologne and something ancient and sharp, like sulfur. His security detail was insane. They weren't just watching the doors, they were dismantling the experience. 2 guards were at the bar, checking the wine corks for needle punctures to ensure no poison had been injected. Another was scanning the waiters with a frequency detector, hunting for wires. "Mario is down," Marco hissed in Aisha's ear, panic making his voice crack. "He's vomiting blood in the alley. You have the head table." Aisha kept her head down to hide the ghost of a smirk. Of course Mario was sick. She had slipped just enough emetic into his espresso 10 minutes ago to clear the path. She approached the table, letting her hands tremble violently as she reached for the water glasses. Luca looked up, his lip curling in disgust. "Marco, what is this? Get this clumsy thing away from my father. She's vibrating." Marco rushed forward to pull her back, but the ebony cane slammed onto the table, stopping everyone cold. Don Salvator turned his face toward Aisha. He couldn't see her eyes behind his dark glasses, but he smiled, a cruel, thin expression. "No," the Don croaks, his voice like grinding gravel. "Let her stay. Fear makes the service faster. I want to see if she breaks." The dinner service began, and the pressure in the room ratcheted up until it felt like the air itself was flammable. Every scrape of a fork against china sounded like a knife being sharpened. Every clink of a glass sounded like the cocking of a pistol. Don Salvator was holding court at the head of the table, tearing into a rare steak while recounting the siege of Palermo in 1990. He spoke with his mouth full, switching between broken English and guttural Italian curses. "They thought they could hide in the warehouse," Salvator growled, gesturing with his steak knife. "But we didn't go in. We just locked the doors and lit the match. Quei bastardi bruciavano cum candele. They burned like candles." Aisha approached from his left, holding a bottle of 1982 Barolo like it was a holy relic. This was the moment. She uncorked it perfectly, keeping her eyes downcast, playing the part of the invisible servant. But as she leaned in to pour, the massive bodyguard behind the Don shifted his weight. His elbow clipped Aisha's hip. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough. Aisha stumbled. Her heel caught on the thick carpet. The heavy bottle slipped from her gloved fingers. Splash. Time seemed to stop. The dark red liquid exploded across the table, drenching the white tablecloth and, worst of all, soaking into the entire left side of Don Salvator's pristine white silk shirt. It looked exactly like a gunshot wound. The silence that followed was absolute. Then came the mechanical click-clack of 5 slides racking back. Before Aisha could even gasp, 5 Glocks were aimed at her head. Luca Venari shot out of his chair, his face purple with rage. "You stupid bitch! You're dead! You hear me? You're dead!" Aisha froze, eyes wide, paralyzed by the sudden violence. But Don Salvator didn't shout. He didn't even flinch. He slowly set his knife down. He dipped a calloused finger into the wine staining his chest, brought it to his lips, and tasted it. He looked down at Aisha, his expression unreadable behind the dark glasses. "Kneel," he whispered. Aisha sank to the carpet, the wet silk of her uniform clinging to her skin. She felt the cold, unforgiving steel of a suppressor pressed hard against her temple. She squeezed her eyes shut, letting out a pathetic, whimpering sound. Don Salvator loomed over her, looking down like a god judging an insect. He didn't seem angry anymore. He seemed bored. He reached out and tapped her cheek with his cane, hard enough to leave a bruise. "Look at it," he sneered in English, his voice dripping with venom. "Shaking like a leaf, you people. You are all the same, no discipline, no grace." He gestured to the wine stain on his chest. "This silk was woven in Milan. It is worth more than your entire village. It is worth more than your life." Aisha sobbed, "Please, sir, I have a family." "Silence," Salvator barked. He turned his back on her, dismissing her existence entirely. He looked at his son, Luca, and when he spoke again, the language changed. It wasn't English. It wasn't Italian. It wasn't even the Sicilian you hear in the movies. It was the old code, a guttural, ancient dialect from the mountain strongholds of Corleone, a language of shepherds and bandits that had died out 30 years ago. He used it so the American bodyguards wouldn't understand the order. "Portala in Cusina," Salvator grunted in the thick, rhythmic tongue. "Tagliel la gola lai, non ravenarmi el appetito qui davanti." Take her to the kitchen, cut her throat there. Do not spoil my appetite here. The room waited for Aisha to scream, to beg, to faint. But the sobbing stopped, instantly. Aisha's shoulders squared, her head lifted. She opened her eyes and the terrified servant was gone. In her place was something cold, ancient, and predator-sharp. She looked directly at the Don's back. When she spoke, her voice was a perfect mirror of his, the same cadence, the same guttural rhythm of the old code. Si spargi sang in Cusina, il sugo sapra di ferro, vecchio. If you shed blood in the kitchen, the sauce will taste of iron, old man. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was the sound of a world-view shattering. The bodyguard pressing the gun to Aisha's head hesitated, his finger trembling on the trigger. He looked at the Don for an order, but the Don was frozen. Don Salvator turned slowly, his face drained of color. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunting disbelief. Even Luca looked confused, his eyes darting between his father and the maid. He understood Italian, but the words she had used were ancient, woven with slang he had only heard in his grandfather's drunken nightmares. "Who are you?" Salvator whispered, his voice trembling. He didn't ask in English, he asked in the dialect. Aisha didn't ask for permission to rise. She simply stood up. The movement was fluid, regal. The guards shifted, but no one fired. They were paralyzed by the Don's fear. She took a step toward him, speaking the forbidden tongue with the casual ease of a native. "I am the memory you tried to bury, Salvator. I know about the 3 judges you planted under the olive grove in 94. I know the gold from the heist of 89 isn't in Switzerland. It's melted down into the frame of your grandmother's bed. And I know what you whispered to Isabella the night she fell from the balcony." Salvator staggered back, clutching his chest. He looked at her not as a woman, but as an apparition. "No," he gasped, pointing a shaking finger at her. "Impossible, you sound like her. You sound like the ghost of Corleone, but she was a white woman. She died 20 years ago. I saw the body." Aisha smiled, and it was the coldest thing in the room. "Spirits change vessels, Salvator, but the debt remains the same." "Fuori, get out!" Salvator roared, waving his cane at the army of bewildered bodyguards. "Everyone out, except Rocco and Luca." The room cleared in seconds. The heavy oak doors boomed shut, leaving a sudden, suffocating quiet. "Sit," Salvator commanded, pointing to the chair opposite him. Aisha didn't hesitate. She sat, not like a servant, but like a judge. She picked up a napkin and calmly wiped a spot of wine from her wrist. The power dynamic had flipped so violently the room was spinning. "Don Michel," she said, answering the question he hadn't asked yet. "He found me in an orphanage in Addis Ababa. He brought me home to the hills. While you sent your son to American boarding schools to learn how to play polo, Michel taught me the old code. I know the laws of silence better than your own blood does." Luca slammed his hand on the table, his face flushed with humiliation. "She's lying, Papa. Don Michel died in prison. He didn't have a black daughter." "He had a soldier," Aisha corrected, her voice ice cold. "And he raised me to hate you." Salvator leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Then why aren't I dead? You had a knife in your apron. You had the wine bottle. Why are we talking?" "Because I didn't come here to kill you, Salvator. Not tonight," Aisha said, leaning back. "I came because someone else did, and if they kill you, they take the city. I want the city to burn, but I want to hold the matches." Luca laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "This is a joke. You expect us to believe a clumsy maid is here to save us from a phantom." Aisha didn't look at him. She glanced down at the cheap, plastic Casio watch on her wrist. She watched the digital seconds tick over. "You have 30 seconds before the front door explodes," she said, her voice flat. "I'd suggest you get under the table." Luca opened his mouth to mock her again, but the world answered for him. The shockwave rattled the crystal chandelier. The heavy oak doors of the restaurant entrance didn't just open, they were blown off their hinges. Distant screams were instantly drowned out by the mechanical, rhythmic thud of automatic suppression fire. "Bratva," Salvator hissed, realizing too late that his security outside was already dead. These weren't street thugs. This was a military incursion. Rocco, the head guard, drew his weapon and moved to the door, but a burst of fire through the wood turned his chest into a ruin. He dropped without a sound. Luca scrambled backward, knocking his chair over. He fumbled for his pistol, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't disengage the safety. Papa, we have to go." But the Don couldn't move. He was pinned in the booth, his cane useless, his age suddenly a death sentence. He was a sitting duck in a tailored suit. Aisha moved. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She grabbed the hem of her long, restrictive maid's skirt and ripped it violently up to the thigh. She kicked off her heels. In one fluid motion, she snatched the serrated steak knife from the Don's plate. The door to the private room was kicked open. A mercenary in full tactical gear, face covered by a balaclava, stepped in, raising a compact submachine gun. He had the drop on them. Lucas screamed. But Aisha was faster. She didn't aim. She simply lashed out. The steak knife spun through the air, a blur of silver under the chandelier light. It buried itself to the hilt in the mercenary's throat, right in the soft gap of his armor. He gurgled, dropping the gun, and collapsed forward. Aisha stood over the body, breathing steadily. She looked at Luca, who was still struggling to hold his gun steady. "That," she said, her voice calm amidst the chaos, "is how you hold a knife, boy." Luca stared at the dead mercenary, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. But Aisha didn't wait for applause. 2 more shadows filled the doorway. Aisha moved. She didn't fight like a brawler, she fought like water. She grabbed a heavy magnum of champagne from the ice bucket and swung it backhand. The bottle connected with the first attacker's helmet, exploding in a shower of vintage glass and foam. He staggered back, blinded. Before the second man could raise his rifle, Aisha drove a sommelier's corkscrew into the gap between his vest and his neck. He dropped instantly. She spun toward the Don, grabbing him by the lapels of his ruined suit. He was frozen, a deer in the headlights of his own violent history. "Abbassiati, a sinistra. Get down, left," she barked in the old code. For the first time in 40 years, Don Salvator didn't question an order. He obeyed instinctively, ducking low as a spray of bullets chewed up the mahogany wall exactly where his head had been. Aisha shielded him with her own body, dragging him behind the overturned heavy oak table. Another mercenary rounded the corner, kicking a pistol across the floor as he advanced. It was a fatal error. Aisha didn't reach for the weapon on her hip. She dove. She slid across the marble floor on her knees, intercepting the sliding Glock mid-motion. She checked the chamber, racked the slide, and fired before she even stopped moving. 3 shots, 3 targets, 2 in the doorway, 1 on the balcony. All 3 dropped simultaneously. It was mechanical perfection. "Move," she screamed, hauling the Don to his feet. She grabbed Luca by his collar, dragging him like a sack of flour. "The kitchen, go!" They burst through the swinging double doors into the stainless steel labyrinth of the kitchen. But as the doors swung shut behind them, a blast of heat hit their faces. The back exit was blocked. A wall of orange flame was already climbing the curtains. They were trapped. The kitchen was an oven. The fire at the back exit was consuming the oxygen, turning the stainless steel room into a suffocating trap. Don Salvator slumped against a prep counter, clutching a bleeding graze on his arm. Luca paced frantically, gun in hand, looking at Aisha like she was a bomb that hadn't detonated yet. "Why?" Luca shouted, his voice cracking. "You killed 3 men for us, you speak our code, but you look at him like you want to eat his heart. Why are you helping us?" Aisha didn't look at Luca. She stared at the Don. She reached into her apron, but instead of a weapon, she pulled out a smartphone. She hit record. "I didn't spend 20 years learning your dialect to let a Russian mercenary steal my kill," Aisha said softly. Salvator looked up, his eyes narrowing. You are Isabella's girl." "Isabella," Aisha repeated. "The woman you threw off the balcony in '94 because she threatened to go to the police. I was in the closet, Salvator. I saw it. I heard the sound she made when she hit the pavement." She stepped closer. The phone camera focused on his sweating, pale face. I learned your language. I learned your history. I washed your floors and poured your wine. I became a ghost in your own house just to get close enough to end you. Then do it, Luca screamed, raising his gun. End it. No, Aisha snapped, not even flinching. If I kill him now, or if the Russians kill him, he dies a martyr. The Lion of Naples who went down fighting. Statues will be built. Songs will be sung. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. I don't want you to die a hero, Salvatore. I want you to die a traitor. I want you to die with nothing. The kitchen doors groaned under the weight of a battering ram. Splinters flew. The Russians were coming through. Aisha held the phone inches from the Don's face. Confess to the murder of Isabella Morti. Tell the world where the bodies are buried. Destroy your legacy right now, or I open that door and let them turn you into a piece of meat. The door hinges screamed. Don Salvatore looked at the door, then at his son, and finally at the woman who had hunted him for 2 decades. He saw the end. Give me the phone, he whispered. I, Salvatore Venari, ordered the death of Isabella. The confession took 10 seconds. It destroyed 100 years of history. Aisha tapped the screen. Upload complete. The file was instantly sent to the FBI, the New York Times, and every rival family in the city. The Venari legacy was dead before the phone went back in her pocket. Done, she whispered. The kitchen door finally gave way, splintering inward. But Aisha didn't wait. She kicked the debris outward, catching the lead Russian off guard. She fired her last 2 rounds blindly into the smoke, creating just enough chaos to clear a path. Move, she screamed. They burst out of the service exit and into the alleyway. The cold rain hit them like a shockwave. In the distance, the wail of police sirens grew louder, the cavalry coming to collect the carcass of the Venari Empire. The Russian mercenaries, hearing the sirens, scattered into the darkness. They were alive. But as the adrenaline faded, Luca Venari raised his gun. He aimed it squarely at Aisha's back. You ruined us, he sobbed, the rain mixing with the tears on his face. The recording, everything we built. It's gone. I can't let you leave. Aisha stopped. She didn't turn around. She stood perfectly still in the downpour. A trembling, bloodied hand reached out and pushed Luca's barrel down toward the wet pavement. Put it away, Luca, Salvatore croaked. He looked smaller now, hollowed out. Papa, she destroyed the family. No, Salvatore said, watching the woman in the torn maid's uniform. She didn't ruin us. She defeated us. There is a difference. Show some respect. Aisha didn't say a word. She simply started walking. She vanished into the steam and shadows of the city she had just conquered. They say the clumsy waitress disappeared that night, but the next morning, the Venari Empire crumbled to dust, and in the hills of Sicily, the shepherds started whispering a new legend. The story of the Black Shadow who speaks with the tongue of kings. Who was SHE really? Subscribe for Part 2.